Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to MBNK News. I am Veronique Lawson for the Special News Report edition. One of MBN's mission is to deliver factual and independent news reporting each month, focusing on the important story that we deem worth giving over as we contrast them with the original truth, the kingdom truth. Our aim is continuing to deliver some intriguing updates with the most impactful and current news story on the latest global headlines. This month, editor picks are as following. So let's dive right in. Kickstarting with the national news item on the agenda. With slightly coverage for March 10, the Trump administration says it is stripping union protection for 47,000 workers at the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, including the right to collective bargaining. American Federation for Government Employees National President Everett Kelly condemned the move as a pretext for attacking the rights of regular workers, Americans across the country, because they happen to belong to a union. In addition, some 80,000 workers at the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, were offered lump sum payment up to $25,000 if they agree by March 14 to resign their post. This buyout offer came after some federal funding researchers at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention received a survey requiring them to determine how their work aligns with the goal of the Trump administration. Let's hear the tape.
President Donald Trump has signed a new executive order aimed at ending union rights for hundreds of thousands of federal workers. The move looks to limit numerous agency employees from unionizing and instructs the government to stop engaging in any collective bargaining. It's the latest attack on federal employees from the Trump administration and comes the same week the Department of Health and Human Services announced they'll cut 10,000 employees from its workforce. Plus, Republicans are ramping up to pass their massive reconciliation package and get it to Trump's desk by Memorial Day. The clock is ticking with only 59 days to secure votes in both chambers. Joining me now is the Hill's congressional reporter, Michael Schnell. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. The American Federation of Government Employees has warned Trump's latest executive order would strip labor protections for hundreds of thousands of civil servants. Is this order meant to make it easier to slash the size of the federal workforce?
Yeah, hey, Judy, that could certainly be one of the aspects here. We know that we have seen a number of these unions sue in response to some of these executive orders and other actions taken by the Trump administration, including that Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, that has received so much attention for its efforts to scale down the size and scope of the federal government. So certainly that could be one aspect here, though I will note the Trump administration has said that the purpose of this order, this effort, was because they argue that the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978 argued that allows government workers to unionize, which, quote, enables hostile federal unions to obstruct agency management. So that's what we're hearing from the Trump administration directly, but certainly there are a lot of questions here of, is this a way to take away perhaps a roadblock as the Trump administration tries to, as you mentioned, scale back the size and scope of the federal government?
The White House cited national security reasons for ending those collective bargaining agreements with federal unions at multiple agencies. Which ones are specifically targeted?
Yeah, there are a total of 18. I'm going to read you some from the list. It's the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, Department of State, and Veterans Affairs as well. In addition, so those are all, things dealing with national security, as was mentioned, but there are some things that don't exactly relate to national security that were also involved. For example, the Treasury Department, all agencies within HHS, Health and Human Services, as well as the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, National Science Foundation, and the General Services Administration. So as I had mentioned, 18 different agencies here that have been involved. There are also other component agencies that are involved as well. So certainly a very wide swath in terms of this executive order.
Yesterday, Michael, as you know, the White House announced it was pulling Elise Stefanik's nomination for UN ambassador. And in a Truth Social post, President Trump said it's essential we maintain every Republican seat in Congress. He pulled multiple people from Congress, leaving 4 open seats. Is this a lesson for the president?
I mean, it's sort of interesting because we always knew that this was the problem, and Speaker Johnson, he would probably argue facetiously, but I think there was certainly some truth to it. Had asked, had publicly said, "I'm pleading with the Trump administration, stop taking my guys. We are running low." And Trump took Mike Waltz to be his national security advisor. He took former Congressman Matt Gaetz to be his attorney general before Matt Gaetz had dropped out, and he took Elise Stefanik to be his UN ambassador. And just the truth of the matter is that congressional Republicans, particularly in the House, have a lot of work to do over the next 2 years. President Trump has a big agenda that he wants to get passed, including extending the 2017 Trump tax cuts. That's going to require near unanimity in the House to get things done because of the slim margin. And there are some folks who are voicing concerns with that effort and others. So at the end of the day, I think that President Trump just recognized that, look, I need as many supporters and votes in the House as possible. That includes Elise Stefanik. So he ultimately came to this decision to yank her nomination. But again, I will note, Judy, this is not some new phenomenon, right? We always knew that the margins are tight in the House. Of course, there's some concern and some questions among Republicans for that special election to fill Mike Waltz's seat next week in Florida. But still, the numbers have been known since November, so it's certainly curious timing.
Republican leaders could call a budget vote next week as they look to pass their massive reconciliation package. And House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries had this to say.
House Republicans are fighting with Senate Republicans. Senate Republicans are fighting with House Republicans. House Republicans are fighting with each other because you've got a group of people who are uncomfortable with the fact that they were forced as House Republicans in so-called swing districts to vote for the largest Medicaid cut in American history. And we will not let the American people ever forget it.
So, Michael, my question to you is Jeffries onto something here? And what are Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson doing to satisfy Republican lawmakers?
Yeah, I mean, he is right in the sense that there has been some Republican infighting over this package. Look, right now, Thune and Johnson have a pretty large task on their hands, a tall task on their hands. They have to reconcile the House's budget resolution with the Senate's budget resolution. And there were a lot of differences in that. Does the debt limit include it? Is it not? How much in spending cuts do you do? How few of spending cuts? Where are those spending cuts from? And what does the extension of the Trump tax cuts look like? That's just a few of these questions. And there has been plenty of infighting among Republicans. You've got hardline conservatives on one hand who want really deep spending cuts and are okay with changes to Medicaid. And then, as Jeffries noted, you have some of those more moderate Republicans, some who represent districts that Kamala Harris had won back in November. And before that, President Biden had one back in 2020, that are apprehensive to go forward with these cuts, particularly if it's going to impact Medicaid. So we're going to see that push and pull play out over the next few weeks. It's going to be interesting to see what compromise Thune and Johnson come up with, because that's going to have to then be cleared by both chambers. And then, Judy, the even more difficult part of this process starts, which is actually crafting the legislation in line with that budget resolution. So Senate Republicans have said that, they're going to see if they can try to have a vote on this next week, which would then mean the House could take it up the week after that and get this part of the job done before folks break for Passover and Easter recess. But it is a very tall task, so we're going to have to see how that moves ahead in the days to come.
Switching gears here to the continued Signalgate fallout, President Trump doesn't seem ready to use his famous catchphrase, "You're fired," on those involved. Does Trump want to avoid starting a laundry list of angry ex-officials who could publicly badmouth him, just like what happened in his first term, or does he not want to give the media a win here?
Look, I'm not going to try to get inside the head of Donald Trump on this, but I will note that thus far he has shown support for his administration officials that were involved with this, particularly Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. So I will note it doesn't seem like this controversy is going away anytime soon. Yesterday, we heard from Roger Wicker. He's the Republican chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He and his Democratic counterpart, Jack Reed had sent a letter asking for an inspector general report, an investigation into what had happened, and a classified briefing on the matter. Scrutiny is rising among Democrats. Republicans are still some Republicans rather are still hammering at the administration for what went wrong. So it's going to be interesting to see how Trump deals with this going forward, and if at any point he does end up, firing somebody for what happened. But up to this point, it does not seem like there's any appetite for that right now.
Very interesting indeed. On the other hand, President Trump signed an executive order terminating security clearance of employee at Perkins Coie, the law firm that represented Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. A spokesperson for Perkins Coie called Trump's move patently unlawful and promised legal challenge. This comes just a week after Trump signed another executive order targeting the Washington, D.C. law firm Covington & Burling, which employ a lawyer who worked in the Obama and Biden administration and who recently aired Jack Smith, the special counsel who led investigation into Trump's. Likewise, on March 17, President Trump invoked an 18th century law to order the deportation of Venezuelan nationals from the United States. On Saturday, the Trump administration flew more than 260 immigrants to El Salvador, including over 130 people accused but not convicted of having ties to the gang Tren de Aragua, which Trump has labeled as the terrorist organization. Equally important, April 2nd will be remembered in the U.S. history as the Liberation Day. The Trump reciprocal tariffs were rolled out to match the duties that other countries charge on U.S. products. Let's watch the tape from WSG.
The United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. But we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries. We didn't want to do that. I'd like to see the chart if you have it. Could you bring it up, Howard? This is our great Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. Thanks, Howard. So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, where they took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it. Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals. And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually. They're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that. But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough, great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office, right over there, right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose. But you see the numbers. The numbers are so disproportionate. They're so unfair. At the same time, we will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. You notice that on the chart. And that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating. So we're going to have a minimum of cheating, and we're going to be very severe on the people that at the gate that watch the tariffs and watch the product coming in, because there's been a lot of bad things happening at the gate because the money is so enormous that you're talking about. There's never been probably anything like it in terms of the enormity, and there are a lot of bad things happen at the people that do the check-in, and they're looking at 10-year jail sentences if they do play. We're going to treat them so good, but if they cheat, the repercussions are going to be extremely strong. Foreign nations will finally be asked to pay for the privilege of access to our market, the biggest market in the world. We're right now the biggest market in the world. We had a great country 4 years ago in terms of the economics. We were doubling up on China. We were doing so well. Nobody was going to catch us, but so much of it slipped away over the last 4 years under Biden. I campaigned on this policy throughout last year, and today that promise was made, and it was also a promise, as you know, that was kept. Promises made, promises kept.
Indeed, promises made, promise kept, Mr. President. In addition, the following clip explains better why tariffs. Let's turn it to it.
His economic plan makes complete sense. The US has 36 trillion in debt. In 2025, they will spend 6 trillion, but will only collect 4 trillion in revenue. So they need to borrow 2 trillion, and this will increase their debt to 38 trillion. Trump's economic plan is based on 3 levers. Number 1, cut expenses by 1 trillion, which is Doge, Elon Musk. He's targeting waste and fraud, like social security payments for people who are 150 years old. That is just fraud. 2, increasing revenue by 1 to 2 trillion through, number 1, tariffs. They will increase tariffs from 50 billion to 500 billion target. People will say, but other countries will retaliate. They will not be able to do it. The US is the biggest customer on earth. They consume 20 trillion every year. They are the biggest importer. They import 3 trillion every year. Plus, the current tariffs is actually not fair. Why should US cars entering Europe faces 10% tariffs, while the European cars entering the US just pay 2.5%? It's not fair. And because of the tariff changes, it now makes economic sense to build factories and businesses inside the US again. That means more jobs, means tax-paying businesses, and more foreign investment coming in. He will also increase revenue by deregulation. He will remove unnecessary regulations and rules, making it easier to do business, so business can grow faster, generate more tax revenues. He also make this gold card, which is offering lifetime US residency for 5 million. I think at least 1 or 2 million individuals globally can afford it. So if just 10% of them, if just 100,000 people buy this card, that's 1 trillion in incremental revenue. The third lever is he will reduce taxes. If he successfully cut 1 trillion in waste and expenses and add 1 to 2 trillion in revenue, the US will have a surplus. They will have more money than they want. So he will cut taxes. For individuals, anyone gaining more than 150K, he will make them pay 0 taxes. And on corporate taxes, he will go down from the current 21% to 15%, compared to the European average of 22%. France average is 25, I think, and Germany is 30. So at 15% corporate tax, the US will become one of the most business attractive countries on earth. Bottom line, this is exactly how government should be run, efficiently. Because when you eliminate waste, the money can actually go where it is actually needed, to the elderly, to the sick, to people who cannot work. And that is the real purpose of government, to protect the weak. Very few countries have the political will to do it. It takes leaders with backbone, charisma, and clarity of vision. Do you have leaders in your country pushing for real reform, or are they talking about non-relevant side topics? And let me know if you think Trump's plan is bad. Let me know why, because I think it is just common sense.
Perfectly said, sir. The purpose of government is to protect the weak, and very few countries have this in place. Continuing along the same line, President Trump argues that his trade policy could raise over 1 trillion in the next year or so, helping to reduce the national debt and potentially offset or replace income taxes. He maintained that tariffs are strengthening the US economy, bringing billions of dollars a day into federal coffer. He said, and I quote, "There is a chance that the money from tariffs could be so great that it will replace, in the old days, about 1870 to the 1913, the tariff were the only form of money," referring to the Gilded Age, a period of rapid industrialization and economic growth and rising national wealth, though marked by stark income inequality and the widespread poverty. Moving next to the next topic, censorship. The previous administration worked to silence dissenting voice, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said. The US has officially shut down a government agency that was used by the Biden administration to censor Americans. Secretary of State announced the closure of Global Engagement Center, JEC, which has been operating as a counter foreign information manipulation, RFM. Rubio said, and I quote, "Under the previous administration, this office, which cost taxpayers more than $50 million per year, spent millions of dollars to actively silence and censor the voice of Americans they were supposed to be serving." And I continue. I quote, "This is antithetical to the very principle we should be upholding, and inconceivable it was taking place in America." Let's hear the chair.
For the next 5 minutes. Mr. Taibbi, the Twitter files showed how the State Department's Global Engagement Center, and I know you've done some reporting on this, initially created to counter the foreign disinformation campaigns, ended up censoring American speech directly and by proxy. It was established in 2016, $61 million, 120 employees. And what we found now through further reporting is that at the exit of the Biden administration, they kind of shifted things around to make sure that it was still viable and still could operate. Can you just explain kind of in general what your reporting discovered and what you've seen since then?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Congressman. The Global Engagement Center, which was an organization that was unknown to us when we started the Twitter files, and it started off as a counterterrorist organization. A source that I spoke to that had worked there described the transformation of their mission as CT to CP, counterterrorism to counterpopulism. We found Global Engagement Center reports on a variety of topics within the Twitter files. They also worked with the Stanford Internet Observatory and the Election Integrity Partnership. And at the end of this year, they were set to expire and be defunded. But essentially, what happened was they took the same amount of employees, they renamed themselves R/FEME, and they scattered the employees physically throughout the building in different places to make it impossible or make it more difficult to eradicate the agency. Now, I'm not sure how that has all panned out. My understanding is that ultimately this will be defunded, but those personnel and that money still exists, and they still have exactly the same mission that was delineated for them in 2018 by legislation.
And it was the way that they utilized what was called bad speech and good speech, right? Can you describe how they kind of manipulated things that was presented to the American public? And a lot of this was initiated during COVID, right?
Yeah, so the Global Engagement Center, they had a really important, I think, innovation in the whole evolution of the digital censorship movement. They put out these reports. Some of them were sort of old school intelligence reports where they actually used sources to identify accounts that were reasonably linked to foreign governments or foreign intelligence or might be bots. But then they had this concept they called the information ecosystem, and that just drew in accounts whose messages were too much in sync with those other accounts. And as a result, we had people who were completely innocent and in many cases were prominent politicians, like there were prominent Democratic politicians in Italy, for instance, and in France, who were deemed to be part of the Russian ecosystem or the Iranian ecosystem or the Chinese ecosystem. This is just old school guilt by association, and it was part of their method. We found this repeatedly in their reports.
Yeah, the last question I had was, so as the Biden administration leaves and they morph this group into another kind of different size organization, I mean, the fact of the matter is, I mean, this is a perfect target for what DOJ is looking at right now, because there's no way to really reform these organizations, especially because it's part of the State Department. So it would be something that Secretary Rubio would absolutely have to go in and either rework start to finish or just eliminate it. Is that correct?
I would think so. And again, the process of scattering the organization throughout the building, and this is a prime example of how it's so difficult to eradicate these institutions once they've taken hold.
Yeah, Mr. Schellenberger, I'll just ask you kind of the final question, and that was just, you talked earlier about these types of organizations that are embedded, and then how do you eliminate them? How do you change them?
I mean, you really have, I mean, my view is that you have to shut them down and reconstitute them with different rules, different leadership, personnel as policy. So, I mean, you can't have somebody heading up CISA that thinks it's their job to go around and to censor their fellow Americans. You've got to have somebody there that's really committed to cybersecurity, which is in their name twice. That's how supposedly committed they are to it. So any organization that has that level of mission drift, I think you got to shut it down and reconstitute it later, and I hope Congress considers doing that.
Thank you very much. My time has expired.
Mr. Chair, I have a unanimous consent request.
Indeed, we need to shut it down and get rid of that. Moreover, United States of National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard exposed alarming Biden-era domestic terrorism strategy. Here's the tape.
Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii, Democrat, joins us now. Congresswoman, great to see you. I know you've just been out of the job for a week or two. Are you surprised they're pushing forward with this extra surveillance on would-be domestic terror?
It's so dangerous. You know, as you guys have been talking about, this is an issue that all Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians should be extremely concerned about, especially because we don't have to guess about where this goes or how this ends. When you have people like former CIA Director John Brennan openly talking about how he's spoken with or heard from appointees and nominees in the Biden administration who are already starting to look across our country for these types of movements similar to the insurgencies they've seen overseas, that in his words, he says, make up this unholy alliance of religious extremists, racists, bigots. He lists a few others and adds at the end, even libertarians. So when you look at their process and they start looking at, okay, what characteristics are we looking for as we're building this profile of a potential extremist? What are we talking about? Religious extremists? Are we talking about Christians, evangelical Christians? What is a religious extremist? Is it somebody who's pro-life? I mean, where do you take this? You start looking at, okay, well, obviously you have to be a white person, obviously likely male. Libertarians, well, if anybody who loves freedom, liberty, maybe has an American flag outside their house, or people who, you know, attended a Trump rally. Once you start walking this down the path, you see where it leads to a very dangerous undermining of our civil liberties, our freedoms in our Constitution, and a targeting of almost half of the country.
Ilhan Omar says this. We already have laws on the books, sorry, but you are just going to have to learn to apply them. The other thing I thought was interesting, Congresswoman, I don't see any FBI demanding more tools. They feel they got the tools. These are congressional leaders or members who feel as though they're so freaked out by Trump supporters, they still can't understand why anyone would support him. They want to get to the bottom of it. And do you think the whole deprogramming of Trump supporters, this new buzzword among detractors and Democrats, has anything to do with this?
Yeah, I think it does very directly. I think just on the FBI front, I read a great op-ed this morning from a former FBI agent who made a very strong case for why this new domestic terror law introduced by Adam Schiff is wrong and is directly going to undermine our constitutional rights and freedoms. This whole effort, whether you're talking about this bill or people saying that we have to deprogram these Trump cultists and people who voted for Trump because they've been radicalized, all of this just goes to further tear our country apart. And it moves towards the thing Joe Biden said in his inauguration speech that he shouldn't happen, which is a dehumanization of your opponent. And that's where his voice is so necessary right now. He is the president of this country. He delivered this speech, his voice, himself, speaking to the American people. He needs to denounce people like John Brennan and their statements, bills like the one Adam Schiff put forward, and truly speak to the American people about how we must come together around the Constitution, around our Bill of Rights, around these rights that have been endowed to us by our Creator.
If he had your leadership ability, he would do it. Maybe he still will. That's why she ran for president. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian.
Indeed, we need to come together around our Constitution. That's the only Bill of Rights that people need to focus on. Coupled with that, this month saw an advocacy for Trut. Mel Gibson ringing the bell of Trut about 9/11. It's about time for people to know what really took place on 9/11/2001. Let's hear the tale from Tucker Carlson and Republican Carl Weldon. Thank you.
9/11 is going to be the biggest scandal in our lifetime and beyond? Yes, I think it's going to be the biggest scandal in the history of America because it occurred on U.S. soil and because it is so recent that we have relevant information still available.
Right, that's right.
We have recorded information. We have personal information. Once people realize they can talk and not be afraid of being killed or not being afraid of being ostracized. And you know what gets me is reporters who call people, conspiracy theorists. Well, that's all the agency does.
I know.
They're the ones that create the conspiracies.
I'm aware.
I mean, cut me a break.
I'm aware.
They have whole courses for their agents on how to make people look like they're conspiracy theorists.
And the propaganda operations designed to discredit.
Exactly.
Right. And
so all we want is the truth.
Of course.
So Trump, appoint people of impeccable integrity. Let them study the facts. I will testify under oath everything I know about intelligence. Let these 3,000 architects who are risking their careers, making nothing, let them testify under oath. There has been this subtle pressure to the firefighters and to the officers not to talk for obvious reasons. You know what this involves politically. And look what happened to the chief of L.A. The female chief of L.A. comes out and says that the resources were taken away from her for the forest fires. And what does the mayor do? She fires her. That was just a few weeks ago. The firefighters are always a scapegoat. That's why, Tucker, I'm done with this. If it's the last thing I do, firefighters are not going to be taken for granted anymore. We're going to rise up. We're going to shake the country to its roots. So, firefighters are not second-class citizens.
Well, they certainly shouldn't be.
But if they talk, they'll get sidelined. They'll be called crazies. Even though they heard explosions, they can't be allowed to say that.
They heard explosions?
Yeah, absolutely. It's on tape. We have people coming out of the buildings that heard explosions. We have film footage of people that talked to Fox News that was taken off the air and then now that was brought back by X. That's all available. That's why you need a commission to go back and look at all the lies.
So there are, and pardon my ignorance, but there are people on tape saying I heard explosions.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. They are the only high-rise buildings in the world that have ever come down from an airplane hitting them. And those buildings, I read the report from the architect who designed them. They were designed to withstand an airplane hitting the building and standing tall.
And especially Building 7, which had no plane hit it. Right.
No plane hit it. And the building just, you can see it when you watch it on TV, it just implodes straight down. And what really got me again was Oriol Palmer, the battalion chief, arising on the...
Well, tell us who he was. What is...
Okay, Oriol Palmer was one of the most inspirational battalion chiefs in New York.
FDNY.
FDNY, who immediately, in very good shape, had a family, a couple of kids, went into the building as soon as they got on the scene, took the elevator up to the 40th floor, got off the elevator, and you could hear him on the comm system say, I'm here, 40th floor, we're going to start walking up the stairwells. Every 5 floors, he radios back to communications. I'm on the 50th floor. Everything's okay. We're on floor 60. Everything's okay. He's going up. Every so many floors, he gives a report. He reaches the 78th floor, the floor of impact. He comes out of the stair tower. And as clear as you listening to me here, and I know I get passionate and I apologize to your listeners for that. He says, we're on floor 78, the floor of impact. We've got 2 fires and we can handle them. 1 minute later, the whole building collapses. That's not normal. That is not acceptable. That is not what happened.
And this is on tape?
It's on tape.
You had 3 buildings come down, sort of collapse in on themselves, implode, it looked like. And like a lot of people have said, many credible, non-crazy people have said that was controlled demolition. Was it?
Well, when I got up there the day after, I had been in the Trade Center at the restaurant on the top several times. There's no way those 2 buildings could have collapsed into what they were there.
No way. There were no airplane. The truth is coming up. Great. Last but not least, General Michael Flynn exposed a sinister plot by communist thugs like Barack Obama and John Brennan to dismantle America's secret government. His call for arrest of Barack Obama, John Brennan, James Comey, and others over plot against Trump. From his battle-tested perspective, Flynn warned that traitors like Barack Obama, John Brennan, Susan Rice, Jim Comey, Andrew McCabe, and Jim Clapper conspired to overthrow the United States, threatening the very fabric of our republic. He roared that the treason demand immediate arrest and that unchecked action risk plugging the nation into chaos. Flynn's call for accountability echoes the courage of our founders who never bow to tyranny. Let's hear the tale.
Forward. The nation cannot move forward. I don't care how good our how much Trump, adjusts the economy, and he will, but we cannot move forward unless people are held accountable. And I mean very, very senior people, and they all know who I'm talking about. You know who I'm talking about, and I've said it many times. It's the start with Obama and work your way down, right? I mean, and maybe you don't throw a former president into prison, but maybe you do. Maybe somebody says, well, who directed you, John Brennan? Who directed you, Jim Clapper? Who directed you, Susan Rice? Under oath, under the lights, and with the threat of prison, okay? And so who directed you? Well, if they say nothing, okay, then that's fine. Then you're going to go to prison. You're going to prison. You're going to prison for treason, okay? Treason. That's a very strong word. It's a very strong word. And like all these pardons, right? These pardons, the only thing that can't overcome a pardon is treason, is the commitment of treason. I mean, I get called a traitor all the time. And I say, well, wait a second. And, so if I'm a traitor, why am I walking the streets, right? If I committed treason, why am I walking the streets? I was never charged with that. They dismissed my case because they lied, right? And so, you think Mueller and Wiseman, Andrew Wiseman, who was the deputy to Mueller, would have let me go had I was a traitor or that I committed treason? The treason was committed against me as not just Mike Flynn, an Army general, but the national security advisor by a duly elected president of the United States. The outgoing administration under Barack H. Obama committed treason. They committed a conspiracy to undermine a duly elected president, and it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to MBN. We are diving into some intriguing global headlines. So, let's jump right into the next news story. Remember, it's important to stay informed and engaged in global affairs. So, let's stay connected and keep each other in the loop about what's happening around the world. Again, don't forget to hit like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe for more intriguing content coming up next.
Next, let's turn our attention to European, Middle East, and Asia news coverage by our local news reporter, correspondent Victoria. To you.
Now, we'll begin with the UK. Christians and British patrons in London and Australia rallied to declare the UK a Christian nation. In this compelling video, we explore the recent rallies held by Christians and British patrons in London and Australia, where participants declare the vision for the UK as a Christian nation. What does this declaration mean for the future of the United Kingdom? Watch to discover the perspectives and implications of this growing movement. Let's roll the tape.
We will not accept. This is a Christian nation. People think that Christianity is in decline, that are not part of the churches. Let me tell you now, Christianity is on the rise. Amen. We see what is happening to our brothers and sisters around the country, and we see what is happening around the world.
As long as I'm breathing, I've got a reason to praise the Lord, oh my soul. Everybody sing! Oh my soul. I want to be quiet. It's gay. Christ is 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 gay.
Across the United Kingdom and Australia, large groups of Christians have taken to the streets to declare UK is a Christian nation. Participants in these demonstrations often chant Christian hymns, wave placards proclaiming messages such as UK is a Christian nation and Christ is King.
Every religion has the right to be here. Every religion has the right to preach. Every religion has the right to argue here. What any religion doesn't have the right to do is attack anyone. That's right. And that's what we're here to support, to make sure that people understand. We give this king.
And express their concerns about the treatment of Christians in contemporary society. The Christian presence in both the UK and Australia has deep historical roots. The UK, with its established Church of England, has long been considered a Christian nation, while Australia, though more secular in structure, has a substantial Christian population that contributes to its cultural identity. The recent demonstrations reflect a desire among many believers to reaffirm this identity in the face of growing secularism and multiculturalism.
One more time! Praise the Lord, oh my soul. I won't be quiet. I won't be quiet. My God is alive. How can I keep it inside?
Participants in these marches articulate a common sentiment, that they feel marginalized in a society that is increasingly accommodating of other religions and belief systems. They argue that this shift has led to a systematic sidelining of Christian beliefs and practices. As they chant and march, their message is clear. They want to reclaim their space and remind society of the historical and cultural significance of Christianity in their nations. During these demonstrations, many individuals express their fears regarding the treatment of Christians both in the UK and abroad. They cite examples where they believe Christians have been persecuted for their beliefs, highlighting incidents.
He came, he died, he rose from the grave. He came, he died, he rose from the grave. He came, he died, he rose from the grave. He came, he died, he rose from the grave. He came, he died, he rose from the grave. He came, he died, he rose from the grave.
Where preachers have been arrested for sharing their faith publicly. The participants argue that such actions represent a broader trend of intolerance towards Christianity, which they believe is not only unjust, but also contrary to the values of freedom that these nations uphold. One of the most pressing concerns voiced by demonstrators is the perceived double standard applied to religious expressions. Many participants claim that while other religions are allowed to practice freely, Christians face restrictions that limit their ability to worship and express their beliefs publicly. They point to instances where events during significant Christian holidays like Easter have been banned or restricted, citing these as examples of a growing anti-Christian sentiment. The relationship between the government, law enforcement, and religious expression has become a focal point for many of these activists. They argue that the government has failed to protect their rights as Christians, accusing it of being complicit in the suppression of their faith. This perspective is particularly pronounced in discussions about policing and regulations surrounding public preaching and religious gatherings. Many participants claim that the police have been overly aggressive in their enforcement of laws that they believe are intended to maintain public order, but in practice disproportionately target Christian activities. The arrest of street preachers, they argue, is emblematic of a wider trend where Christians are treated as second-class citizens in their own country. The sentiment resonates with many who feel that their freedoms are being eroded in favour of a more secular agenda. In response to these feelings of marginalisation, the demonstrations serve as a form of cultural pushback. By gathering in public spaces, chanting and displaying messages of faith, participants aim to reclaim their cultural narrative. They assert that the UK and Australia are inherently Christian nations, and they refuse to allow this identity to be diluted or erased. This reclaiming of identity is not just about religious beliefs. It reflects a broader cultural phenomenon where individuals seek to assert their values and beliefs in a rapidly changing world. The marchers see themselves as defenders of a legacy that has shaped their nations, and they are determined to ensure that this legacy is recognized and respected. While these demonstrations have garnered significant support from many Christians, they have also sparked considerable controversy and debate. Critics argue that the insistence on labelling the UK and Australia as Christian nations ignores the multicultural realities of modern society. They contend that such declarations can foster division rather than unity, alienating individuals from diverse backgrounds who may feel excluded from the narrative being promoted. Moreover, the perception of persecution may not resonate with everyone. Many individuals from different faith backgrounds share their own experiences of navigating a society that is complex and multifaceted. They argue that promoting inclusivity and dialogue is essential for fostering harmony among diverse communities. The clash of perspectives highlights the challenges of balancing religious freedom with the principles of a pluralistic society. As the demonstrations continue, the need for open dialogue becomes increasingly evident. While it is crucial for Christians to express their beliefs and concerns, it is equally important to engage with those who hold different perspectives. Understanding the nuances of religious expression and the experiences of various communities can pave the way for greater empathy and cooperation.
All I can say is that Jesus is King. Now, continuing on in the UK, in a landmark legal decision that is set to have far-reaching implications across the United Kingdom, the Supreme Court ruled on the 16th of April 2025 that transgender women are not legally considered women under specific legislative definitions. And the unanimous judgment concludes a lengthy legal battle between gender-critical campaigners and the Scottish government over the legal meaning of the term woman in public policy and law. The ruling is being hailed as a significant victory by women's rights advocates and gender-critical activists who argue that the erosion of sex-based rights undermines legal protections for biological women, especially in areas such as single-sex spaces, prisons, and political representation. Let us see a detail.
It's definitive outside the Supreme Court. Men are men, women are women, trans women are not women, not just on paper, but in law. It is so seismic, I think, this judgment for women, that you could put it on a par with votes for women.
Today, the judges have said what we always believed to be the case, that women are protected by their biological sex.
And now let us hear from our colleague Beverly Turner from DB News. Let us see how she celebrates.
That is an historic, important court case. At last, all the shilly-shallying, the liberal nonsense about what's a woman, what isn't a woman. The 5 judges, 2 of whom were women, have said unanimously, when you're born a woman, that's it. If you change your sex biologically, that doesn't change you into a woman.
And do you know what it helps? It helps parents like me.
Of course it does.
So that when we're sat around the kitchen table and my girls are talking about having someone in their school who's a they, them, believe me, there's they, thems in all these classes, I can say there's no such thing as a they, them. You are a boy, you are a girl. You can choose to live however you want to live, but don't ask me to collude in your lie. And I can now say to them, you don't also have to collude in the lie.
Basically, and in a nutshell, if you change your sex into a woman, that does not make you a woman. What a victory for us, ladies. Let us keep on praying that this landmark will be replicated in all nations across the globe so that common sense finally returns and stays for good. Now, we're moving on to Barcelona in Spain. Tourism in Barcelona is driving up housing prices. A council initiative to ban tourist apartments in the city centre hopes to combat this trend and bring a balance to the housing crisis. Let us see.
Alicia Conejero is protesting for affordable housing in Barcelona. Rents in her hometown have increased by about 70% over the last 10 years, according to the city council. The nationwide housing crisis is driving tens of thousands of protesters onto Spanish streets, especially in the country's tourist strongholds.
Vacation rentals make me so mad. Because of them, we locals can't rent those homes anymore.
The pensioner is worried about Barcelona. She says young people can no longer build a future here. Barcelona residents have long shared their city with people from all over the world. Millions of tourists visit every year, and the city is also popular with expats who stay here. Now housing is becoming increasingly scarce and expensive, and residents are being driven out of their neighbourhoods. The problem disproportionately affects low-income households. That's why the city has constructed 54 such apartments out of recycled shipping containers to temporarily house people like Nadia while they look for a place.
In my old apartment, they refused to renew the lease. It wasn't because of outstanding rent or anything like that. The building was being bought by investors, vulture funds, to turn it into tourist accommodations. Our home. My children lived in there. They went to school nearby.
Nadia Chaibi Kaduri and her 2 children have been living here for 2 years. At least they've got a roof over their heads. Nadia works in translation, but as a single mother with a single income, she says she has no chance of finding a regular apartment here.
I work with people from many different countries. And the kind of prices they can pay make them extremely lucrative for landlords. So they wouldn't rent out their apartment to someone like me and my children for €1,000 a month, when a tourist can pay, let's say, €3,000. So that's what they do.
For years, Barcelona has been unable to get a grip on the housing crisis. The tourist industry, meanwhile, is booming. That's why the City Council has decided on a radical step. Deputy Mayor Laia Bonet is proud that Barcelona has issued an ultimatum.
November 2028. From this date forward, holiday apartments would require a new license. But we are saying Barcelona won't be issuing any.
This will make an estimated 10,000 apartments available again. Paula Ginestar rents an apartment to tourists.
Come in. Welcome.
Paula is against the ultimatum. For her and her partner, the apartment is a means of additional financial security.
What they're doing is abuse. We're practically being expropriated.
Under this plan, Paula will lose her license to rent the apartment. She thinks that's unfair, and that the city should distinguish between private landlords and large companies with hundreds of apartments. But she agrees something needs to be done.
Rental prices are out of control. Here in Barcelona and in Madrid, but it's also starting in Valencia. It's crazy. But I really don't think the holiday rentals are to blame.
Next door, at the laundrette, the owner agrees. Cleaning tourist bed linens and towels is good business for Yadisa Duya Yamani here, in Barcelona's popular Poble Sec district. She would miss the work.
They want everything done in 24 hours. That's what's good about it. That everything needs to be done in 24 hours, or in an hour. Then I charge double or even triple. So it's good money.
Tourism is a business, but with side effects. Barcelona's Poble Nou district is about 20 minutes' drive from the centre. Once home to blue-collar workers and fishermen, it's now a lucrative area, and they're being driven out. With an average monthly salary of under €2,000, many can no longer afford to rent their homes. That's why Alicia Conejero supports the 2028 ultimatum.
Renting an apartment like this is impossible for someone on a Spanish salary. Also, the apartments are not rented out long-term. They're rented out seasonally, for 11 months. So after 11 months, they can increase the rent again, or kick you out.
Alicia got lucky. She lives in one of 3 Sostra Civic Housing Cooperative buildings. The cooperative is financed by members and project funds. It offers members a lifelong right to residence without rent increases. Alicia pays around €600 for her small apartment. More residential buildings are reportedly planned to tackle the crisis.
In 3 years, 4 babies were born here. That makes sense. Young residents can plan their lives here. They know they won't be thrown out. They can live, and above all, they can afford the rent here.
Alicia hopes that Barcelona will remain a home for those who live here. Of course, tourists are still welcome, but the city is fighting to strike a balance.
This is not a Barcelona issue exclusively, as it is happening in most Spanish touristic cities, as well as all over Europe. Tourism is not the problem. In fact, it brings a lot of revenue and employs a lot of people. Some argue that Airbnb is the one at fault and should either be banned or strictly regulated, as well as other similar platforms. Nonetheless, although tourist accommodations worsens the problem, it is not the root cause. The root cause really is the shortage of housing, affordable housing. Now, let us move on now onto Asia, more specifically with China. On the 16th of April 2025, Donald Trump raised the tariffs on Chinese imports to 245%, and China has hit back at the move, demanding mutual respect from the Americans. Chinese state media has also joined in, asking the US to stop whining and begin talks. What message does Trump's latest round of tariffs send? Palki Sharma tells you a little bit more. Let us see it.
$10, $20, $54, $104, $145, and $245. This is not a cricket scorecard. This is Donald Trump's tariffs on China. It began with a 10% levy in February. It now stands at 245%. I'll repeat that for you. The US has increased tariffs on China to 245%. The White House announced it yesterday, though this time with less fanfare. No grandstanding by the press secretary, no all-caps post on Trut Social. Instead, this announcement was sneaked into a White House fact sheet. And the reason for this hike? Because China retaliated. Trump says 75 countries have reached out to him. They want to strike a deal with the US, but China has not reached out. Instead, they have imposed a 125% tariff on the US. So what does Trump do? He hikes it again to 245%. The White House says the ball is now in China's court.
Look, the president has made his position on China quite clear, although I do have an additional statement that he just shared with me in the Oval Office. The ball is in China's court. China needs to make a deal with us. We don't have to make a deal with them.
Forget the ball. There is no court left to play in. A 245% tariff is not a pressure tactic or a retaliation. It is simply an ego move. You just heard the press secretary. She says that China needs to make a deal with the US, not the other way around. China should be the one making the deal. So clearly the White House wants a deal with China. They just want Beijing to make the first move. The question is, how will China respond? Beijing had ruled out further tariff hikes last week. They said anything more than 125% is a joke. That is China's tariff on the US, 125%. They will not hike it further. As for talks, China is open to it. They have appointed a new trade envoy for negotiations, but only on the basis of mutual respect.
Let us hope that this trade war between China and the US gets resolved very quickly. This is all that I have for you. Back to you, I'm Veronique.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to MBN&X. We are diving into some intriguing global headlines. So, let's jump right into the next news story on the agenda. Remember, it's important to stay informed and engaged in global affairs. So, let's stay connected and keep each other in the loop about what's happening around the world. Again, don't forget to hit like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe for more intriguing content coming up next.
Welcome back. And thank you again, Victoria, for that extensive European, Asian, and Middle East news. Now, let's continue for the latest development on health. Let's hear the tale from our health news reporter, Aida.
Thank you, Veronique. Let's start today's health news. Our first news is an update on what our new health secretary has been doing for this month.
Hey, everybody. I'd like to share with you a paradox that I've encountered here in Washington, D.C. as the new secretary of HHS. Our department is filled for the most part with competent, conscientious public servants, and yet the agency has been inefficient as a whole. Over the past 4 years during the Biden administration, HHS's budget increased by 38%, and its staffing increased by 17%, but all that money has failed to improve the health of Americans. In fact, the rate of chronic disease and cancer increased dramatically as our department has grown. Our lifespan has dropped, so Americans now live 6 years shorter than Europeans. We are the sickest nation in the world, and we have the highest rate of chronic disease. The U.S. ranks last among 40 developed nations in terms of health, but we spend 2 to 3 times more per capita than those nations. As secretary, I now understand why all this money is not improving our health. HHS is a sprawling bureaucracy that encompasses literally hundreds of departments, committees, and other offices. You know how bureaucracies work. Every time a new issue arises, they tack on another committee. This leads to tremendous waste and duplication, and worst of all, a loss of any unified sense of mission. The resulting pandemonium has injured American health and damaged department morale. When I arrived, I found that over half of our employees don't even come to work. HHS has more than 100 communications offices and more than 40 IT departments and dozens of procurement offices and 9 HR departments.
Wow.
In many cases, they don't even talk to each other. They're mainly operating in silos. Sometimes these sub-agencies work at cross purposes with each other. Some of these little fiefdoms, for example, are so insulated and territorial that they actually hoard our patient medical data and sell it for profit to each other. Instead of remedying the chronic disease crisis, perverse incentives have administrators checking boxes and grading their own homework while public health declines. A few isolated divisions are neglecting public health altogether and seem only accountable to the industries that they're supposed to be regulating. In one case, defiant bureaucrats impeded the secretary's office from accessing the closely guarded databases that might reveal the dangers of certain drugs and medical interventions. I have some good news, though. As part of President Trump's DOGE workforce reduction initiative, we're going to streamline HHS to make our agency more efficient and more effective. We're going to imbue the agency with a clear sense of mission to radically improve the health of Americans and to improve agency morale. We're going to eliminate an entire alphabet soup of departments and agencies while preserving their core functions by merging them into a new organization called the Administration for a Healthy America, or AHA. We have two goals. The first is obvious, to save the taxpayer money by making our department more efficient. And the second is to radically improve our quality of service. I want to promise you now that we're going to do more with less. No American is going to be left behind. Our key services delivered through Medicare and Medicaid, the FDA and CDC, and other agencies will enter a new era of responsiveness and a new era of effectiveness. We're going to consolidate all of these departments and make them accountable to you, the American taxpayer, and the American patient. These goals will honor the aspirations of the vast majority of existing HHS employees who actually yearn to make America healthy. 28 great divisions will become 15. The entire federal workforce is downsizing now, so this will be a painful period for HHS as we downsize from 82,000 full-time employees to around 62,000. We're keenly focused on paring away excess administrators while increasing the number of scientists and frontline health providers so that we can do a better job for the American people. We're going to streamline our agency and eliminate the redundancies and invite everyone to align behind a simple, bold mission. I want every HHS employee to wake up every morning asking themselves, what can I do to restore American health today? I want to empower everyone in the HHS family to have a sense of purpose and pride and a sense of personal agency and responsibility to this larger goal. We're going to save taxpayers nearly $2 billion a year, and we're going to return HHS to its original commitment to public health and gold standard science. I want this agency to be once again a revered scientific institution that once made HHS the envy of the world. I want everyone who works here to be proud of this agency, to be proud of their work, to feel a renewed inspiration and their own sense of responsibility for our success in restoring America to good health. Streamlining HHS is part of a shift to new priorities, especially ending the chronic disease epidemic with clean water, safe food, effective medicine, good science, radical transparency, and a healthy environment. I think most Americans would agree with me that throwing more money at healthcare isn't going to solve the problem, or would have solved it already. Obviously, what we've been doing hasn't worked. That's why we're making this dramatic overhaul. But the real overhaul is even bigger. The real overhaul is improving the health of the entire nation to make America healthy again.
Wow, that was powerful. Make America healthy again. So in order to do that, do the COVID vaccine have side effects or don't have side effects? Let's watch this.
We have a safety alert for most people. The COVID-19 vaccine had no side effects, but for some people, it actually did have some side effects, and they were long-lasting. Yale researchers just released these findings on a condition known as post-vaccination syndrome, or PVS. These are people who have had side effects to the COVID-19 vaccine. So to talk about this more, I'm here with family doctor Nita Bajor to discuss exactly what this means, what was entailed in this study. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's first start with what the symptoms are of PVS. I think it's something I haven't heard of before. So what is post-vaccination syndrome?
So what we're finding is a group of symptoms that we're seeing in people that have received the vaccination. Symptoms can range from mild to severe. This is a new area of research, so as things are emerging, we're finding out, but mostly symptoms like fever, chills, some fatigue that lasts weeks to months to, a long time, joint pain, diffuse joint pain, headaches, Also some nausea, gastrointestinal symptoms like constipation, diarrhea for unexplained reasons, neurological symptoms like dizziness, brain fog, and even some neuropathies and numbness in hands and feet, and also myalgia, which is muscle tenderness and just muscle achiness. So we're realizing that these symptoms are not really fitting. It's challenging to diagnose because they don't really fit one clinical scenario. And of course, we must exclude other medical conditions. Generally symptoms are mild. They're not life-threatening, but they can affect the quality of life. So,
have you seen patients with these symptoms?
Absolutely. I've seen patients, and several of our physicians have also experienced such symptoms because, this happened in a matter of months where people were dying, and a lot of us got COVID, but then the vaccinations were developed. So we're really trying to understand. But for the majority of the symptoms in the patients we're seeing, it's fatigue, joint pain, and neuropathy. I would say that's kind of the majority of symptoms.
Is it a certain age group? Are they older, younger, anybody? Or?
I'm not seeing, I don't know, whether it's any specific age group, but I would say some in conditions, people that have other chronic conditions. I think it links back to the immune system because vaccines challenge our immunity. So those of us that have a hyperimmune response are seeing the manifestation in other systems of our body.
So let's talk about that study. What did the study find?
So the study interestingly found that, it's not, although we kind of started looking at it because of the COVID vaccination, they realized that it could be linked to other vaccinations like the flu vaccine, the hepatitis B vaccine. It showed that it's possibly linked to the lower white blood cells, immune system again, and higher levels of certain proteins in the patient's system. And the other thing that we found is, although, it seems like there's a significant number of patients that are having these symptoms, on a global scale, when billions of people receive the vaccine, that percentage may not be that large in terms of global numbers, but still a growing body of research and, is needed to understand this.
So when someone is trying to decide, should I take a vaccine, how do they go about that process if they're thinking, hey, I had these long-term side effects from the COVID vaccine?
Yeah.
How do they go about that conversation of should I take a different vaccine?
Right. I think it's a really important conversation to have with your physician, with your provider. We are trying to understand the magnitude of these symptoms, the long-term complications and implications of these symptoms. So it's really a discussion to have, and it's more of a personalized approach, And for us as physicians, to be non-judgmental is really important, and to understand each patient's unique scenario and whether vaccination, it's all about risk versus benefit. So we have to make that educated decision with shared clinical decision making, because on a global level, vaccines, it's a public health tool, and it's very important to have safe and effective vaccinations. So when we find people are having symptoms after vaccinations, it's really important to have that discussion and keep an open dialogue as we learn more, as physicians get together and talk about it more as well. So,
all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us and covering that topic. I think it's something we haven't discussed very much before, so it's very interesting information.
Yeah, I think.
All right. Adam?
So I believe in order for us to make America healthy, we need to have the information of what's going on with everything that they are bringing on into the healthcare. So we just talk about vaccines and their side effects. Now we're going to talk about the relation between vaccines and infertility.
Was secretly laced with a hormone to cause infertility was given to hundreds of thousands of women and girls without their knowledge. What if I told you that a vaccine that was banned in the West for killing girls was pushed on African girls, making them 10 times more likely to die? And what if I told you that the man behind all of this, funding it, promoting it, has just had his legal immunity stripped in Kenya? This isn't a conspiracy theory. This did happen, and the evidence is undeniable. Bill Gates, through the WHO, has funded programs that have been exposed as dangerous, unethical, and deadly. And it's time the world started asking some very serious questions. In 2013, the World Health Organization launched a neonatal tetanus campaign in Kenya, claiming to protect newborns from deadly infections. But doctors started noticing something very strange. Many women in this vaccination campaign could no longer carry a pregnancy to term. Suspicious, these doctors took these vials and took them performed for testing in independent labs. The vaccines contained HCG hormones, a hormone vital in pregnancy, chemically bonded to the tetanus vaccine. These vaccines weren't just about tetanus. So what were they for?
We cannot afford to trust WHO anymore, Your Excellency. In 2014-2015, WHO brought tetanus eradication campaign in our country. The vaccine that was used is a different type of a tetanus vaccine that is a fertility regulating vaccine, where they take tetanus and combine it with a hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin that supports pregnancy. And when you inject a woman with that vaccine, she produces antibodies against that hormone and therefore is rendered sterile. We are noticing an increase in the number of infertility cases among young couples who you examine and they are normal but cannot get children, or couples who are losing 3, 4, 5 pregnancies before they can carry any pregnancy to term. We were able to expose this, and we have even published a paper that is available.
But it doesn't stop there. Let's talk more about the DTP vaccine, the world's most popular vaccine thanks to Bill Gates and the WHO. In the 1980s, the vaccine was banned in the United States and Europe after studies showed it caused brain damage and even death. While it was replaced with a safer version in these countries, the older, deadlier versions were still being distributed to children in Africa. When Danish scientists studied more than 30 years of vaccination records in Africa, they found a chilling discovery. Girls who received the DTP vaccine were 10 times more likely to die than children that were unvaccinated. But these girls weren't dying from tetanus, diphtheria or pertussis. They were dying from anemia, pneumonia, dysentery and the diseases that the vaccine left them more vulnerable to. This isn't just about bad science. It's a pattern of unethical experiments on vulnerable populations. Vaccines that were deemed too dangerous for the West, pushed in Africa under the guise of philanthropy. And who's funding this? Bill Gates, the same man whose foundation controls much of the World Health Organization's budget. The same man who just lost his immunity for prosecution in Kenya. Knowledge is power, and this is why we must question the narrative, the motives, and demand accountability. Bill Gates and the WHO must answer for these actions, and we, the people, must stand together for transparency and justice. If you believe the world needs to know the truth, share this video and let's make this conversation so it can't be silenced.
Wow, if this doesn't infuriate you, I don't know what will. Well, what about this? Do you know that it used to be that we have one child per every 35 to have autism when they were born, and now we have 1 in 31? So let's see the news.
Report out today estimates that autism diagnoses are increasing in the U.S. In 2020, 1 in 36 children were diagnosed with the spectrum disorder. The CDC says in 2022, 1 in 31 children were diagnosed. ABC's Rena Roy has more on why experts believe we're seeing that increase.
A new CDC report estimating an increase in autism cases amongst American children. The report says 1 in 31 children under the age of 8 were diagnosed to be on the spectrum in 2022 compared to 1 in 36 in 2020.
We're likely seeing this increase because of a combination of factors: increased awareness and increased intervention. Also, the definition of autism has greatly been broadened. So as the definition broadens, we will likely see a rise in that number.
The data comes from medical institutions across 14 states and Puerto Rico. Not all of the children diagnosed are living with the most severe forms of autism. In this report, less than 40% were classified as having an intellectual disability. Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. addressing these new numbers today.
And this is just one disease. This whole generation of kids is damaged by chronic disease.
RFK Jr. often speaks about rising autism rates, recently facing criticism for consistently omitting crucial context and suggesting vaccines are to blame. Just last week, he promised much more work will be done by the fall.
By September, we will know what has caused the autism epidemic, and we'll be able to eliminate those exposures.
But experts say that's not realistic.
It feels improbable that any group of individuals could get together and find a definitive cause of autism in about 5 months. But one thing that is pretty clear is that vaccines do not increase the risk of autism.
Now, scientists have been studying autism for decades and say it's likely caused by a variety of factors, including genetics. Some experts say it's possible something else might be contributing to the rising rates, including environmental causes. Rena Roy, ABC News, New York.
I believe they will find the answer of what's causing autism, because I believe they already know. They just haven't exposed it. So that's why he'll be able to get it out by September, in my opinion. Okay, so what about disparities still going on between blacks and whites when it comes to healthcare, especially mothers?
Black Maternal Health Week. Organizations and public health agencies nationwide are working to bring awareness to improving health outcomes for mothers, but especially black women. Black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women, and according to the CDC, disparity in the rate of black maternal deaths is still seen in the most recent data. And joining me now is family physician and health advocate Dr. Bayo Curry-Winchell. Thank you so much, Dr. Bayo, for being here. What do people not realize about black maternal health?
They don't realize that this goes beyond access. This impacts black women across all social economics. It doesn't matter about your education, where you live, your profession. You have a higher risk of dying giving birth.
So, I mean, that is pretty shocking just to hear that you say those words, and it's more than just data, or it's actually kind of a reality for people. You say there are 3 C's every black woman should know to take charge of their health. So break that down.
Yes, there are 3 C's: being clear, concise, and confident. We've all had the experience where you go to the doctor and all of a sudden your questions just vanish and you're like, what just happened? Because you're intimidated or anxious. But if you can be clear about your symptoms, instead of saying, I don't feel well, instead say, I have stomach pain. It's been present for 3 days and it hurts after I eat. That can really help paint a full picture for your doctor. The other thing is being concise. All of us have experienced the 15 minutes, you might be lucky and get 20 minutes with your doctor. And so if you can lead with your most pressing questions and say, these are the key symptoms I would like to get answered, that can be a great way to advocate for yourself. And last but not least, be confident. You know your body best. And so be able to advocate and ask questions. All 3 of those allow you to be what I call your chief medical officer. So every time you seek care, you can get the best care possible.
That's really great advice. In the UK, by the way, it's 8 minutes you get with your doctor. I mean, even less. What do health professionals need to do to try to close this gap? Because it's pretty radical.
They need to set aside their assumptions and genuinely listen to their patients, because when you do that, you're able to really lean into individualized care. So thinking about setting aside those assumptions, leaning into that patient in front of you, and think about how hard it was just to even possibly see you, that's going to allow you to give the best care possible and really make sure your patient is seen, heard, and that way you can give that quality of care.
Thank you so much for coming in and raising awareness. This is really, really an important issue. Thank you. Family physician and health advocate, Dr. Bayo Curry-Winchell.
So remember to be clear, concise, and confident. Back to you, Veronique.
Hey, everyone, and welcome back to MBN&X. We are diving into some intriguing global headlines. So, let's jump right into the next news story. Remember, it's important to stay informed and engaged in global affairs. So, let's stay connected and keep each other in the loop about what's happening around the world. Again, don't forget to hit like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe for more intriguing content coming up next.
Thank you very much, correspondent Aida, for that health report. Now we move into our final item on the agenda for this month. And indeed, we are witnessing a huge shakeup around the globe. And the best way to keep the momentum is making sure the right people are put in place in the government and ensuring accountability for the best interest of we the people. And again, as you hear throughout this monthly session today, is that you need to keep clear, concise, and make sure that you know what you're doing. That being said, quickly, this week marked the death of Pope Francis, as well as the stepping down of Klaus Schwab from the World Forum Economic. Wow, what a huge shakeup. out on the globe. Just as we thought that it is something not enough, here is our last item on the news. But the 400,000 gold reserve missing at Fort Knox. Do we still have a gold? Let's hear the tale.
Going to Fort Knox. I'm going to go with Elon. And would anybody like to join us? Because we want to see if the gold is still there. We want to see. Wouldn't that be terrible? We open up this Fort Knox. It's just solid granite that's 5 feet thick. The front door, you need 6 musclemen to open it up. I don't even think they have windows. Wouldn't that be terrible if we opened it up and there was no gold there?
Fort Knox is synonymous with security, secrecy, and staggering wealth. For decades, the high-security vault in Kentucky has been believed to house much of the United States gold reserves, amounting to hundreds of billions of dollars. Yet in a bombshell revelation, President Donald Trump has ignited a firestorm of controversy by questioning whether the gold is still there at all. Backed by billionaire Elon Musk, Trump has insisted on a full audit of Fort Knox, suggesting that a significant portion of the gold may have gone missing. Let's look into the curious case of the missing potential billions at Fort Knox. A treasury of secrets.
So we're going to open those doors, we're going to take a look, and if there's 27 tons of gold, we'll be very happy. I don't know how the hell we're going to measure it, but that's okay. We want to see lots of nice, beautiful, shiny gold in Fort Knox. Don't be totally surprised. We open the door, we'll say, there's nothing here. They stole this too.
The United States Bullion Depository, better known as Fort Knox, was built in 1936 to store the nation's vast gold reserves. It became a critical asset during the economic turmoil of the Great Depression and later played a role in securing America's financial dominance. Over the years, Fort Knox has been surrounded by myths, intrigue, and a nearly impenetrable wall of secrecy. Officially, it houses 147.3 million ounces of gold worth over $430 billion at today's prices. Despite its significance, very few people have ever seen the inside of Fort Knox. The security measures are unparalleled, with the facility guarded by the U.S. Mint Police and located on a military base. The gold is said to be stored in 13 sealed compartments behind a 20-ton vault door, accessible only by individuals with separate access codes. Yet, for all the security, one glaring issue remains. There has not been a full independent audit of the gold in decades. While some officials claim routine inspections have taken place, skeptics argue that these checks have been inadequate. Most famously, in 2017, then Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin visited Fort Knox along with other officials and posted a photo of himself handling gold bars. But this was hardly a comprehensive audit, just a staged visit to reassure the public. The last official audit, conducted in 1953, was only a partial review. This lack of transparency has given rise to numerous conspiracy theories, including claims that the gold has been secretly moved, sold off, or replaced with fake bars. The issue has now resurfaced in the most dramatic way possible, with Trump and Musk demanding answers. Their insistence on verifying Fort Knox's contents has rekindled old suspicions and placed a spotlight on whether the U.S. government is hiding something. Trump and Musk's bold claims.
We're actually going to Fort Knox because I want to see, do we have the gold? Do we still have whatever it is, tons of gold? I hope we do. Wouldn't that be disappointing? Fort Knox. You grow up hearing about Fort Knox. You can't get in. You can't even see it. Nobody sees it. You go there and the place is dry. Would that be terrible?
Donald Trump's assertion that Fort Knox may have been looted is among the most shocking claims he's made regarding government transparency. His remarks, made during a recent speech, suggested that billions in gold may have been stolen without the public's knowledge. We have found hundreds of billions of dollars worth of fraud, he stated, and we've just started. We're actually going to Fort Knox to see if the gold is there, because maybe somebody stole the gold, tons of gold. Musk, never one to shy away from controversial topics, has echoed Trump's concerns. He recently posted on X, "Who is confirming that the gold wasn't stolen from Fort Knox? Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. The gold is owned by the American public. We want to know if it's still there." The claims have been met with fierce debate. Skeptics argue that the idea of stealing gold from Fort Knox is preposterous. due to the high level of security. But the lack of an independent audit has fueled speculation that something might be amiss. The government's repeated refusal to conduct a full-scale inventory has only added to public distrust. While no solid evidence has been presented to support Trump and Musk's theory, the controversy has placed significant pressure on officials to conduct a long overdue audit. A history of elusive audits.
When they take you down there, there's obviously a very secure process. The gold, as I think people know, is not in the building that is seen, but it's actually beneath the ground. There are very serious processes that have to be conducted to get people both in and out of there. And what we saw was a lot of gold.
Although government officials insist that Fort Knox's gold reserves are intact, historical records tell a murkier story. The last full-scale inspection dates back to 1953, and even that audit was incomplete. In 1974, journalists were invited to view the gold, but this was little more than a publicity stunt. While there have been ongoing checks, the actual auditing process remains shrouded in mystery. The most damning revelation came in 2015, when a Freedom of Information Act request revealed that 7 Fort Knox gold audit reports were missing. These reports, which should have confirmed the existence of the gold, simply could not be found. And in 2011, Treasury Inspector General Eric Thorson assured Congress that, quote, 100% of the U.S. government's gold reserves have been inventoried and audited. However, this claim was impossible to verify due to missing documentation. Auditing Fort Knox is no simple task. Experts estimate that a full audit would take at least 18 months and require thousands of hours of work. Given the sheer scale of the gold reserves, verifying its existence would require advanced equipment, including high-precision scales and X-ray fluorescence scanners. The cost of such an operation is another barrier, as it could require millions in taxpayer dollars. The conspiracy theories.
This is for the unbelievers. Okay.
The vault only opened twice since FDR. The first time in September 1974 for a group of journalists and members of Congress to dispel rumors the gold was gone.
The mystery surrounding Fort Knox has given rise to several conspiracy theories, each attempting to explain what might have happened to the gold. One of the most popular theories suggests that the gold has been secretly sold off to foreign banks to help the U.S. government pay off its national debt. While Fort Knox holds an estimated $430 billion in gold, the amount is minuscule compared to the country's $28.3 trillion debt. Still, some argue the gold may have been quietly liquidated. Another theory posits that Fort Knox never actually contained as much gold as the government claimed. According to this idea, the facility has been an elaborate deception designed to maintain confidence in the U.S. dollar. A third claim revolves around counterfeit gold bars. In 2009, reports emerged that gold-plated tungsten bars had been circulating in international markets. Some theorists believe that Fort Knox may contain fake gold, a claim that has never been formally investigated. The final and most dramatic theory, now championed by Trump and Musk, is that the gold was stolen. This would require an unprecedented level of corruption and secrecy, yet the lack of transparency has left room for this kind of speculation. Could the gold have been moved?
You have all these people. We had Senator Huddleston on there, who's from Kentucky. We said, "Is there gold in there?" He said, he thinks so. We said, "Could it be gone?" He says, "It could be gone." I'm like, what do you mean?
Nobody knows.
Another major question surrounding the Fort Knox controversy is whether some or all of the gold may have been moved to another location. While officials maintain that the reserves remain intact, historical records show that gold transfers between vaults have occurred before, sometimes under highly suspicious circumstances. One of the most well-documented cases involved the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which also holds a significant portion of U.S. gold reserves. In recent years, there have been multiple reports of gold being quietly transferred from the New York Fed to undisclosed locations. Some of this gold was returned to foreign governments, while other transfers remain unexplained. Adding to the mystery, U.S. banks have been flying large quantities of gold from London to New York, raising questions about whether gold is being reshuffled between vaults. The lack of transparency surrounding these transfers has led to speculation that Fort Knox's gold may have been moved in a similar fashion, either to another domestic vault, a private institution, or even overseas. If the gold has been moved, the question remains, where did it go, and why hasn't the public been informed? Without an independent audit, there's no way to verify whether the reserves remain in place or have been secretly relocated. Until a full inventory is conducted, suspicions will continue to grow over the fate of America's gold. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think Trump and Musk are right to demand an audit of Fort Knox? Let us know in the comments section below.
Good question. And great way to fade out this special news edition with a statement. Now that the Pope is dead and Klaus Schwab stepped down, truly hoping that gold reserve at Fort Knox is not the biggest cover-up in history. That wraps up today's edition of Mamlakak Broadcast News Special Edition report on the Global Headline Update for April 2025. Thank you for joining us on this journey. MBNK News is excited to bring you the latest global news and hope you are eager as we are to keep up with the world's happening. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more updates. Stay up and stay informed. Thank you. I, Veronica Lawson, and have a great evening and see you soon. Signing off.